When I saw Dr. Shiu do his thing, he did it so simple, like the perfect omelet or the perfect peanut butter and jelly sandwich or whatever, the way he needled. And I realized, like, wow, I have to really refine my touch and my skill, my awareness of just putting simple points in, like PC6 or Niguan and, San Yin Jiao and stuff. So actually, when I went to China, it was almost like letting go, let's relearn everything again. And you're in a huge setting now.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Neurological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. Doctor, heal thyself. This old cliche is usually thrown around as a way to point out the inconsistencies and contradictions anyone in the healing trade has. After all, we're human and not exempt from the troubles, blind spots, and self-delusion that goes along with being human. Maybe, if we are attentive, we can proactively make some progress. And for sure, clinical practice will show us our tender, guarded, or uninvestigated aspects of personality that hold the potential for transformation and healing. Doctor, heal thyself. But there's another area that many of us could work on. I know that I've had to. Doctor, support yourself. I know this might sound harsh, but here we go. I say this because I'd like to see people successful in their practices and able to take care of others for as long as you'd like to have this as a career. There's a misconception that running a business is somehow antithetical to helping people with their well-being. That running a business and doing it well, it makes you somehow tainted. That receiving fair and reasonable compensation for the years and effort you put in, it in some way makes you a thieving capitalist. I've heard plenty of people say, I'm a healer, not a business person. But I think a deeper truth is that for many of us, and I've struggled with this, accepting money somehow feels wrong. Because after all, we are here to help, and taking money for our services means patients might not have funds for something else. Here's the thing. You can't fill someone's teacup from an empty pot. Here's another. All of nature works, when it's working well, on some kind of mutual exchange. We breathe out CO2. Trees love that. They breathe it in and exhale oxygen. We see this in the fundamentals of acupuncture. Everything is connected through a system of generation and control. Everything interacts with everything else. Try giving your work away for free or at a cost that is below what is required for you to pay the rent and care for yourself, and you're wiping out the jing of your practice. The truth is, you have to learn how to work in such a way that you can generate a profit. If you have issues with business, let me assure you, practicing medicine does not give you a bypass on psychoemotive development. If you're avoiding the business aspects of having a practice and blaming it on that business is a tainted enterprise and that you're somehow above that, you might want to take another look at what you're attempting to avoid. Even if you, air quotes here, hate business and decide to work for someone else, you're still creating a profit, or the boss is not going to be paying you. It's just that you've outsourced the management of your practice to an employer. Doctors of old were expected to cultivate themselves with pursuits beyond medicine. Consider this. Having a business, it's a kind of cultivation that will reveal to you your blind spots, surface your half-baked ideas about economics, and for sure, put you front and center in terms of self-care, responsibility, and understanding how practical or not your ideology is. It's good to support yourself and wonderful to have the freedom it brings when you're not dependent on somebody else or enslaved to a system that benefits itself from your hard work. Good old-fashioned American self-reliance gets a bad rap these days. It gets conflated with selfishness and a lack of concern for others. But here's the deal. If you are truly in business for yourself, then your character and reputation cannot be hidden from the community. If you're a bad actor, people find out and avoid you. If you're doing good work, your practice will grow. Are there sleazy business people? Sure, of course. But that does not mean all businesses are untrustworthy. One more thing, even though I could go on and on, by sidestepping the very real concerns around money and business, you distance yourself from being able to connect with your patients around their issues that they might have around self-support and self-worth. Learning to accept fair compensation for your work, it actually makes you a better doctor because you're more connected to the give and receive that all healthy systems must be able to do in order to function well. Clearly, I'm an unapologetic booster of small business. I suspect it's related in part coming from an extended family where most of my relatives, they didn't have a job, they had a business. When I was younger, I tried my hand at a bunch of different things to keep food on the table. I thought I was kind of a screw-up, but I remember my grandmother telling a friend of hers, "My grandson, he's an entrepreneur." I hated hearing that at the time. I thought I was above that, as I imagined entrepreneurs were the worst of the money grabbers. But my grandma, she was right. And it turns out most entrepreneurs are not looking for money. They're looking for meaning. And it helps when you can make some money in service of that dream. Creative people, we rarely stick to one thing. There's always something else that gets our attention as time goes on. That's what happened for Clayton Shu. He was keen on orthopedics, dug into it, and learned it too. And like other creative people, once he did that, something else got his attention, something that is of interest to anybody over the age of 50, brain health. When Clayton goes at something, he goes full tilt. In this conversation, we're going to get into treating strokes, Parkinson's, and preventing neurological deterioration. We'll get into it right after a few words from the people who make it possible for the Qiological Sound and Motion Labs to bring you these conversations. Stay with us. Clayton Shu, welcome to Qiological.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited and love your podcast and how it's contributed to just spreading more knowledge from all these different experts.
I don't know. I like talking about Chinese medicine. And thanks to the internet, I can do that every day if I want to.
Right.
I don't spend time on Twitter. I spend time on Qiological.
That's right. Yeah, it's amazing how many episodes you've done. I think it's between you and Joe Rogan.
Okay, I'll take that. Wow, the Joe Rogan of Chinese medicine. I can go for that. That'll be fine.
There you go. He's an alternative healing for sure.
Well, you know what's funny about it is, I mean, as we're speaking right now, it's like 57 episodes. Here's the thing. It's just relentless persistence. It's just continuing. It's not unlike having a Chinese medicine practice for that matter, or learning acupuncture, or martial arts, or parenting, or anything, right? Like anything. It's not a matter of like, oh, out of the box, it's amazing. No, it's just week by week, episode by episode. You do it long enough and then things accumulate. So it's nothing special. It's just persistence.
Gong Fu, right?
It's Gong Fu.
Like the definition of Gong Fu. It's hard work over time and becomes polished, and you get Wenjing, right, which is like the trained force, versus Li, which is just raw force. Because I can see how like it became very refined, like further and further as you developed it and stuff. So,
well, your allusion to Gong Fu, which most people think of as like, ooh, open a can of whoop ass on someone because you're great at it. No, Gong Fu, if you know Chinese, it's like persistent work over time. It's like, whoa, that person's got some Gong Fu.
Right. Right.
I mean, you could be a gardener and have some kick-ass kung fu because like you really know how to garden. Or you could be a cook with amazing kung fu because you know how to cook.
Yeah, it was the martial artist who stole the principal name and said, this is what it means to whoop ass. But you're totally right. It actually can apply to anything. And I like the example of like if there was a person who had a triplets and taught their kids like the same recipe to make cake and gave them the same ingredients, same instruments, the same amount of time. And even though they're genetically the same, when they bake the cake, each cake of the three triplets will taste different.
That's right.
Because they're going for how they put the ingredients together and how they make the taste or their timing of how they whip the butter, all that's different, right? So
it's so true. You know, and we have this thing right now in our society of, well, we're supposed to have equal outcomes for everything, for everybody. It's like, man, they can't even get triplets to make the same damn cake. Because, you know, and I read something the other day. I think it was some quotes from Robert Heinlein. You familiar with him? The science fiction writer?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a quote from Robert Heinlein that said, all men are born unequal.
Wow.
Yeah. So it goes against like what's in our Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal.
Right.
Because actually the truth is, I mean, okay, maybe equal like in the eyes of God or whatever. But the truth is we're all innately very different.
Yes. Yes.
But it's so easy to forget that.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to celebrate that sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's okay to be different, right? Like it's when someone goes on vacation, they don't go to the exact same kind of neighborhood they live in. You know what I mean? They want to go and unplug and immerse themselves in another culture and
maybe
come back stimulated and
maybe, or maybe they just go to Disneyland.
Right. Epcot Center. There you go. Yeah.
The sanitized version.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you bring that point up because it seems to me this is one of the things that is fundamental to Chinese medicine, which is we look at each person as being unique and different. Everyone is not the same. It is fundamentally against the principles of Zhongyi to attempt to treat people the same. Like that's just a ridiculous idea.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that you want to cultivate your abilities and your skills so that you can customize based on what you're sensing with the tools you have, right? So yeah, I like to think that a lot of things when we talk about equality and stuff, it's kind of like saying going towards infinity, right? Because and also to make something equal takes a lot of effort. It's not just you divide it into quarters and everyone has the same quarter piece. It's equal, right? So like we have to strive to get results. But like you said, you don't just get results. You have to look at what's in front of you. And hopefully you have enough sensitivity or tingly, right? Make the adjustments to make something work. So I think that's a lot of the topics we'll be talking about today too, which is sometimes it's not finding a super magical mushroom on a mountain, you know what I mean? Or a magic needle forged out of a special metal. It's actually learning how to make very simple, regular things work towards results, you know? So, which is kind of like, it's like you're recording, you know, your sessions for the show and everything. But like you said, you're doing the same thing, but it's refined, right? So parts of the whole thing got more and more refined. And when you come together, it's like, wow, this is a whole different beast now that it's still a show or a recording, but it's plugged together differently now. So
yeah, there's something about effort over time.
Yes.
And I don't think there's any way to avoid it. There's no shortcut. You just can't shortcut it. You know, so often we hear about, you know, a hack. Oh, I got a hack for that. We're going to biohack that. There are no shortcuts. I mean, the shortcut is that there's no shortcuts.
Yes, exactly. There's no secret. You almost have to come full circle with that. And for instance, this is like a very simplified timeline, but a great example of what we're talking about, which is, you know, at first I wanted, when I got into the profession, I was like, okay, I'm going to treat martial artists and sports warriors. I'm not interested in, you know, things like, let's say, GYN conditions or digestive or immune system disorders. I want to do like the great looking athlete, kung fu warrior and fix them, when they get into an injury, right? Then quickly over time, 10 years pass and I'm like, I'm fixing all these injuries and stuff. But then like I run into like stroke patients or patients with Parkinson's or something like that, right? So I notice, I can't just treat it like they have tendonitis right now. You know what I mean? Like I got to somehow connect this to other parts of their body, their nervous system, their brain, etc. Right? And so that led me towards like learning things like Shiu Kai Chow, which is like a stroke type of acupuncture developed in Tianjin, right? And then 10 years later, I'll come back to the States and I'm applying it, and then in my mind, I'm thinking, do I need to wait till someone has a stroke to apply this great system, or can I customize it so it can be used for prevention, for longevity, to help prevent someone from brain injury? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Like it just started to evolve.
Yeah. And this to me is the beauty of practicing medicine. For sure, we all start off with an idea. We have something that gets our attention. We explore it because, well, it's fun and we help people and we can make some money. All those are great things, right? Wow, I'm making a livelihood doing what I love. And then you start noticing where things don't work.
Came up short.
Or you get this idea, it comes up short, or there's an idea of, wait a minute, what if I use this treatment in a different way? There's like something that rhymes with two different situations.
Yes, exactly.
And you can just go explore it. There's some going through for you.
Yeah, exactly. It's just you can take the one thing that you probably learned your first year, but you're so good at knowing how to use something. It could be Chu San Li, or it could be Sanyan Jiao or whatever. And now all of a sudden you can use it to treat like Parkinson's or memory. And it's just like, what? You know what I mean? Like, but it's like, what, maybe one of the first points you'll learn within the first 6 months of TCM, right?
Yes. So this is...
Yeah. So all of a sudden, I'm going towards the gut-brain axis, and all of a sudden it's like, I am treating digestive disorders to treat you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
To treat like the brain or memory and stuff. And I'm like, okay, that brought me full circle. It took 30 years,
Okay. I want to dig into this method that you're talking about. But first, there's just this thing on the top of my mind, and I just feel like I need to say it.
Yeah.
Which is, we read all these indications in the books. Like, this point is good for this, and this. And there's this, at least for me, because I'm really linear, although Chinese medicine's beat that out of me to some degree over the years. But there's this idea that, this point does all these things. Well, actually, there's a potential for the point to do those things in some ways, depending on how you're approaching it.
Yes.
Which is that gets very weird very quickly. I'm not talking about intention. A lot of people talk about intention. Well, I'm going to use my intention to make the point do X, Y, Z. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that, how do I say this? It really has to do with like being and seeing.
It's the situation, yes. Or being in the moment and realizing the right thing is to do that point again at this moment, because that's what the environment inside the person and the other external environment factors is actually revealing to you.
Yeah. But it seems it has something to do, let me ask this as a question of you. To me, it seems like it has to do with how we as the practitioner are perceiving. Does that make any sense?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And I think it makes total sense. And it's almost so yin and yang in a way, right? Like very, very simple, but not simple too. So, because we tend to, in our the monkey mind side, right, overcomplicate things, right?
Hang on a second. I feel like I'm interrupting you a lot, and I apologize for that. But you just said monkey mind.
Right.
And I think it's really unfair to monkeys.
Right.
No, I'm serious. I'm actually dead serious about this. I think it's very unfair to monkeys to take the human mind, the troublesome part of our human mind, and say, oh, that's a monkey mind. I don't think it's a monkey mind. I think monkeys probably have very different minds than us. This thing that we call monkey mind, it's not a monkey mind. This is actually our human mind. This is an aspect of our acquired mind. I think it's an incredibly human trait that I don't think other animals have it. Does that make sense?
I can agree with that. I can agree with that.
Let's stop ragging on the monkeys. Leave the monkeys alone.
Yeah. Well, I was referring to like, let's say like the sage mind, which is kind of calm and taking that simple next step, versus the monkey mind, which may look at 4 or 5 different things before they grab that peanut or something like, you know what I mean? Like in that context. However, we can definitely turn this into a neurological perspective. We could say the high beta ADHD side versus the calm delta alpha theta of the brain. You know what I mean? So
okay. All right. Okay, we're going to have to get into some brain science here. Let's rewind the tape for a moment. And tell me about this treatment.
Yeah.
Okay, that's better.
Yeah.
Tell me about this treatment method, and then let's get into the work that you're doing with neurology.
Yeah. So my treatment method is called nanopuncture.
Nanopuncture.
Yeah. And that was coined after I had done almost like 20 years of sports and orthopedics, and then studied Shiu in Tianjin under the tutelage of Dr. Shiu, where I was working on trying to absorb and translate as much as I can in a large hospital setting, which, you know, can be pretty overwhelming, but seeing how I could bring that into more of a private practice setting in the United States later after my studies. And Shiu Kai Chao means awaken the spirit and open the orifices. In this case, it could be like the gates of the mind, right? So, and you know, now means actually in Chinese, now is actually the word for computer, right? Because the symbol looks like, for brain, looks like a box or a computer. And they feel like the computer is like, your mind is like a computer, right?
Well, we say the same thing in English. It's so funny. Like, depending on what level of technology we have as a culture, we go and use that as a metaphor for our bodies. Like the heart is a pump, you know, the brain is a computer. Of course, it's none of those things.
Right. Exactly. But we tend to do that, right? We in our character as humans, we personify things as either being human, or lately we personify things as being living robots, right? And stuff like that. So in the last couple of years. So
well, we seem to live within our stories.
Yes. So I took a lot of the knowledge and techniques I was learning in Tianjin and started to apply it to a lot of different things back when I returned to America. And
Now, when you went to Tianjin, were you going specifically to learn about strokes? Was that the thing? It's like, I'm going to learn to treat stroke.
Yeah, at the time.
Okay.
For sure.
All right.
Yeah. Because it was one of those, like, at the time, and this is over now, gosh, this has been almost 8-10 years. I think 8 years since I've been in Tianjin. But the period of my practice before that, and I think this goes for everyone, you know, you may feel like a rock star in your private practice or doing something, but then when that one stroke patient walks into your door or uses a cane or is wheelchaired in, you know, all your confidence kind of shrinks a little bit, and you're just like, right? And you're like, what am I going to do? I need to know something, or I need to know something.
I've heard about scalp points. Maybe I could do that. Yeah, it's like, good luck.
Yeah, exactly. And in my personality, like, although I know scalp acupuncture is effective, it just wasn't my thing. It just wasn't something that I personally gravitated towards as a method that I felt comfortable with. Part of that was because when I was in school, we had been learning it, and when we were in practice, someone just completely passed out when someone put a scalp point in another student. You know, it's that kind of turned me off. It made me look for other solutions, you know.
Wow. Okay. You know, that's actually kind of cool, because in a way, people are always saying, well, does acupuncture do anything? It's like, yep, you can make people pass out. You know, I mean, another way to look at that is, oh, wow, okay, something really powerful can happen.
Exactly.
Like, let's learn to be cautious with this loaded weapon.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I think it made me look for other solutions when I eventually saw how Dr. Scher's method was. He would, like back to our whole discussion earlier about, what are you looking for? What are you seeing as the doctor or the healer at that time? What should you be doing? Do you need that magic missile or that magic needle? When I saw Dr. Shiu do his things, he did it so simple, like the perfect omelet or the perfect peanut butter and jelly sandwich or whatever, the way he needled. And I realized, like, wow, I have to really refine my touch and my skill, my awareness of just putting simple points in, like PC6 or Niguan and, San Yin Jiao and stuff. So actually, when I went to China, it was almost like letting go, let's relearn everything again. And you're in a huge setting now where they're treating 10,000 patients a day, and you're going to let this wash over you and absorb as much as you can, So after the training, and after I saw that many types of those really extreme conditions, it's almost like you're calm and you're relaxed and you got this. And so I started treating like a lot of different types of stroke patients very calmly, and almost like, no, you still have to put in like, a regular point, like swing 6 or, do 20, right? But you don't have to do it in a scalp method. You're just properly putting the point in that you learned in a very specific and gentle manner. It was almost like the gentlest Chinese city I've ever visited, where everyone's needle was soft. It wasn't hard or heavy and wasn't overly stimulated, but it was very gentle.
That's a little bit unusual.
Yeah, it was so soft that you would think that they're using sarin needles, but they're not. They're just hand inserting and hand manipulating the needles, and it looks like a pianist, like Yang Yang playing piano, the way they would move their fingers and everything. So I realized there was just a lot to how do you hold a needle. Like some people hold the needle so tight that they're bending the needle before they even put it in the person, and some people are holding it too loose, right? So it was just made me realize there's a sweet spot to every part of the picture, like with how you do the needle and needle manipulations and stuff. So when I finally came back, and at first it was just so difficult then only to treat like Parkinson's patients and memory, and dementia. And then I really started visiting like things and looking into research again with the gut-brain axis, and realized that, wow, you can fine-tune the techniques to target the gut-brain axis, which is bringing into the picture of like, okay, that what we're eating and the different microbes and stuff and the different proteins that are forming in your digestive system affects your brain, right? So, and the vagus nerve, and so when I started looking into that, I even started looking into like all the different gallbladder points on the head and bladder points on the head and different points on the gut, right? And I started seeing like this really interesting relationship. And I was starting to see that like, okay, it's kind of odd here. Remember we were talking about all the different indications for points and it can be overwhelming when you're trying to study it, right? But I would notice certain points on the head like gallbladder 8, and it would always Shuaigu, right? And it would always talk about, well, there's going to be a one-sided headache. There may be incessant vomiting. It may be good for a cold stomach. It's definitely used with agitation, fullness, eating, drinking, injury by alcohol. And I'm like, that's such an odd thing to say. You know what I mean? Like, and so specific that I started seeing a pattern of like, okay, there's another point on the head that says only a one-sided headache. Definitely alcohol. Definitely vomiting. And I'm like, in my mind, I started tracking it and needling it very gently too. And I started to notice that I was affecting the memory of my patient. It's like, and the cool thing is,
what did you start to notice? Because it seems to me you're going along, you're following a line of inquiry. You've learned a method, you're helping people. It's so fun to be at the beginning of learning how something works. It's so engaging of our senses, and you can just soak yourself into it. And then you start noticing that the memory of your patients is changing. What was it that you were noticing? Like, what was it, Clayton, that caught your attention? You're going, memory's different.
It's a very, very good question. So, and whatever I've done in all my interests, whether it's Tai Chi, Kung Fu, tennis, or whatever, and especially acupuncture, I've always observed I've always stepped out. I would always do a little Buddhist shift and step out of myself and see, what am I doing before I actually needle someone? Or what's my habits? Am I palpating the neck? Am I touching, am I taking the pulse, or am I like palpating other parts of the body? Do you know what I mean? Because when someone lays on a table, you kind of like touch the top of the traps, you touch the scapula, you get an area ready because you're going to needle it, right? Everyone has their habit, just like a baseball player has specific habits before they
That's right.
play the World Series,
Batter up.
Yeah, it's like you do these rituals because you want to give the best treatment you can give.
Yeah.
It's like that baseball money. The really funny one was in the 80s, So I started to observe that before I needle anyone, every time I would palpate the neck, the back of the occipital lobe area, the back of the head. And I started noticing over the years that I was feeling different topography changes in the scalp and the skull area. I would feel different swollen spots along the gallbladder channel, different harder spots right behind the head near the occipital area that would affect vision. I would have noticed the neck. All of a sudden, this person's neck looks like they're a high school wrestler, and it's like this really thin woman. Like, what happens? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see that image.
And I would just have like almost like J.K. Rowling writing on a napkin, like I would just collect all these Post-its and write stuff. And it started to form like a pattern. And I'm like, wait a second. Whenever I got a concussion patient, for example, there would always be a certain bump behind the head near GB20 that didn't feel like just muscle. It felt like a little round cherry or something like that, but like stiffer and harder. And if it was on the left side of the back of the head, it would affect the right eye, which makes sense with the optic nerve, right? So, because it crosses. So then I would start paying attention as my knowledge got better from sports to brain to nervous system. I would just notice like, okay, this happens on the same side, but this injury is definitely an ipsilateral effect on the person. Whereas this injury was on the opposite side, but it crossed. Do you see what I mean?
So you're not really, you're making a map as you go. You're like a charting navigator.
Yes.
You're like exploring the terrain. What's here? What am I noticing?
Yeah, like you're mapping the stars on a boat, on a huge ship. Like you're like Columbus trying to get to like India, but you landed up in America, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm trying to be what I did in the beginning and middle is I was very unbiased. I was just like, I'm just going to write it down that there was a bump here, or that there was a rigid line here, like on the side above the ear, or there was like a swollen section. Okay. And eventually this led to this whole system I actually developed in the last few years. We call it skull palpation, actually, which is within the nanopuncture system that I teach nationwide. Because originally I just wanted to teach everyone just to be stroke literate to some degree so that they don't have to lose confidence. They feel like they have a toolbox that can help a stroke patient, right? But since things kept evolving and I kept observing more, it became more like, hey, this is really about brain longevity. And you can use these points preemptively and see the early signs that someone's cholesterol is rising, their digestive system's way off, and they're getting these signs on the neck and on the head that shows that they're getting these gut-brain axis indications and symptoms, right? And when I started to look at the system of acupuncture points and particularly the names, because I didn't just like saying, like stomach 25 or gallbladder. I like looking at the names, right? So you look at a point like UB10 is Tianzhu, it means celestial pillar, right? Whereas stomach 25 is called Tianshu, which is celestial pivot, right? Well, what's a pillar and what's a pivot? That's an axis. Is that cool?
Yeah.
So and then I started looking at, okay, these points, they have a reference, almost like what modern neurology is looking at with Parkinson's. They're looking at the gut-brain axis as an answer to Parkinson's and Alzheimer's dementia. But the ancients also looked at these points as pivot or axis or pillar points. Isn't that? It was just fascinating to me. And it would also relate to either digestive or mental conditions too, when you read about it, you know? And so I started to moxa and needle those more too, right? And I would notice like, okay, we're fixing the digestive system. It's definitely correlating with the latest neurological research, and even the Chinese names actually correlate, you know? So like, and you can remember this, everyone remembers this, but we never know how to apply it, which is related to what we were saying way in the beginning, which is totally related, you know, like childhood epilepsy, right? That was one of those, just why is that appearing with UB10 or mania or seeing ghosts, right? And you're looking at phlegm in the brain, but now they can see that it's phlegm that could have been deposited there from the vagus nerve. And so it's coming out of abnormal proteins from your digestive system that could be actually compiling through our own nervous system incorrectly into the brain, you know? And I just love that, like, I started seeing this amazing pattern that made more sense out of those things where sugar, excess eating and drinking, and vomiting, phlegm, dizziness, they were all coming out of these points like gallbladder 8. And then it would correlate to all these other digestive points on the stomach and abdomen. And they would have very similarly related things, you know? So that's how I started to develop this whole system. And it's like
you're just observing. You're like curious.
Yeah, I'm just
like what's going on here? And so you're writing it down. You're looking for patterns, and you're finding a real correlation between gut and brain. It's a very popular idea these days that our digestive system, diabetes, who is it? David Perlmutter, I think, the neurologist in Florida, talks about Alzheimer's as like type 3 diabetes.
Exactly. Which is why his book was called The Grain Brain, right?
Grain Brain, yeah.
So if you take that...
God, that was like, what, 12 years ago or something?
Right. And but even from 12 years ago, there's a ton more development and research, and you can scan the brains. And not only that, to be honest, all that stuff refines what we do as Chinese medicine practitioners, because, for instance, after explaining all that and getting into that, like, you know, one of the best formulas still that you could give a person, let's say with Parkinson's, would be like Ban Xia Xie Tang, you know? It's funny, but it's so simple, right? We were talking about, like, you know, you think I'm going to give you this amazing 12, 14 herbal formula with an herb you have to order from some mystical mountain, but it's not.
Right. And you probably have some bugs in it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. You know, and yet one of the biggest signs, if you meet any Parkinson's patient, for instance, is constipation, and it's driving them crazy. And who can treat constipation the best without giving someone a laxative is a Chinese herbalist, you know, like. For sure. Like, we have so many nuances to how we could treat almost any type of constipation, whether it's phlegm or blood deficiency or, you know, so.
I want to come back to this for a second. Ban Xia Xie Tang. Yeah. I mean, I get it. That's a really helpful digestive formula. It regulates the up and down, you know, it just it greases the skids, and it greases the pivot in a way. Exactly. The up and down is the pivot, right? So, and you can modify it in different ways. You can change its strength just with a few ingredients too. So, but see, it's like saying, I didn't give you a new formula I created, right? I brought us back to a simple formula that we know. And yet, when you're treating us the very place. Well, it sounds like you're also doing simple points. Yes, exactly. I learned and figured out that treating these very, very difficult conditions, which is actually difficult, I would say, epidemic conditions that are plaguing the planet, simply because of modern medical technology, you know, we have people living much longer than 100 years ago,
right? So like 100,
Yeah, we have a chance to get the diseases of old age.
right. Before, if you broke your hip, that's it. You spiral because you can't get around, you get depressed. The person passes away, unfortunately, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
With the hip replacement, with different cardiac pacemakers, everything, our body's sustaining, but now we're caught flat-footed with dementia, with the brain breaking down, right? And unfortunately, and why I chose to leave the sports medicine practice was I saw technology as you can replace practically a vertebrae, a knee, a shoulder, but you can't replace the brain. So we have to, if you replace the brain, you replace the person, right? So I definitely saw it as,
I think Elon Musk is working on that. Don't worry.
oh yeah,
It's coming.
yeah, it is impressive. They have have you seen the Neuralink? It's pretty impressive. So
Like all powerful tools, great potential, great danger.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Oh yeah, I am, as much as I like technology and we use really advanced technology in my office, like I am definitely afraid of Skynet. So yeah. So
Well, I remember when life was analog, so so I think it's why I like acupuncture so much. It's totally
yes.
analog.
Yeah. And wherever you go, if you have a pack of needles, you're effective.
That's right.
You can do something with your knowledge and observation and stuff.
With your
So,
knowledge and observation, and that's the trick.
yeah.
Knowing what to pay attention to, knowing how to pay attention, how to discern your own patterns over time.
Yes. And observe yourself, which is
And observe yourself.
how I developed coming back to this full circle.
Well, that's kind of a trick, isn't it?
Yeah.
Have you got some thoughts on observing yourself for people that don't have practice with that?
Yeah, I think I do actually. That's a good question. You mean like who haven't engaged or know how to start practicing to observe themselves daily? And
Time
stuff,
I'm thinking
so.
about going on with the patient. What's the pattern? I got to get the pattern right so I can needle it and help them. I'm not watching me. I'm watching them.
Right.
Which is important. It's a piece of the picture, but you adding in the watching yourself watch them. Oh, that's a different level of observation and perception.
Yeah. I do have some good advice to recommend in the beginning, and it's definitely related to what you just said, which is you do want to observe yourself. You want to be gentle observing yourself too. Like you have to observe yourself as if you're neutral even to yourself, if that makes sense.
Oh, Clayton Shu, that's like the hardest thing in the damn world. Observe yourself neutrally.
Yes. Yeah, it's very difficult because we can be harsh to ourselves and to our own expectations. You have to check that self out the door, because if you don't, you're so hard on yourself. You're missing the outside environment again. Like you are connected to the patient and the outside environment. And when I mean observe yourself and observe how the patient connects to you at that moment, right? I don't feel like we use this a lot in our practice of how we teach. If I don't think I hooked their sheng, like a fisherman that throws a line out and hooks the fish, I won't start the session. I won't start palpating and peeling back that pack of needles and stuff. I have to see if I'm engaged to the patient, if the patient actually is engaged to me. And once we have that connection, then I feel like we can conquer the world. We can do almost anything,
So this is interesting to me because so often I get caught up with what I'm doing in the clinic, right? It's my job to do something. And it sounds like you're talking, and then there's the idea of like, wu-wei, like non-doing. But what I think I hear you talking about is wei wu-wei, doing, not doing. You are attentive to how you are.
Yes.
And you're looking for a kind of connection. You're not forcing it. You're you're like inviting it.
Yes. You're right. You're wanting, you're welcoming it, right? Or hopefully you are welcoming it. Like a patient who doesn't want to be there.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if you know the right treatment. if the patient doesn't want to be there, even when you put the needle in, you had a bitter taste in your mouth, like, so.
Clayton, this is why I never allow a girlfriend or a wife to schedule an appointment for the man in her life.
Right.
Because it never worked. Ever. They have to do it.
Yeah, they're kind of just like humoring someone to sit there and talk to you, and you're trying to like dive into their soul, get into their, what's causing them the real stress internally, and they're just counting the minutes for them to leave. They're not even taking their shoes or socks off, and even though they have like foot pain, so right. So yeah.
But anyway, back to us, that piece of inviting and welcoming, not being too harsh on ourselves, and at the same time, not going too easy either.
Yes, because it's also like in like when you, for instance, I just know this as the best example is like in Tai Chi, like with Tui Shou, right? If when someone's engaging, they're initiating. When they initiate, you don't push back with a bigger force or smaller force, right? You're kind of matching them, and then it starts like a smooth whirl or blender, right? And then it's very subtle, like who gets control of the situation, right? But if you go too big, the person detaches from you. If you go too small, they can't find you, right? And in a way, this is what's happening also in a treatment room, like, but you can start it with your Shen and the Shen of the patient. Is our Shen meeting at a platform, right? And if it is, then you can say, okay, well, let's work on this part of your body, and they'll get into position, right? So, but if they're not engaged with you, they won't even get into position quickly enough or smoothly enough. You can tell they're just resisting, and if they are, that means you have to do more work, right, to achieve that great treatment that you want to do, right? So that's what I mean by like connecting with the patient and engaging or hooking the Shen like a fisherman too, and then when they're engaging, they're putting as much effort in and energy, and you can borrow that, you can use it, and you can make a better treatment than if you use all of your own energy for that one moment.
No, you'll just end up tired.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the patient will often feel invaded.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You just used the phrase hooking the Shen, and when we talk about De Qi, we talk about it's like a fish nibbling on a hook. So this hooking the Shen idea, it sounds like it's engaging the Qi of the patient, the room, and the connection all at once.
Yeah. Well, this is a complex but very good example of hooking the Shen and also turning all the cylinders on to help the session. There could be someone who they may have a certain kind of communication issue or some dementia, but some speech aphasia, right? So they may not even really be aware you're there and that you're an acupuncturist, but they know they're getting treated, right? So, and then as one example, I like to use humor, right? And I may say something that just is very odd as I'm like lifting a needle or something or positioning them, and I'll see if they actually picked up, even though they have a communication issue or they have some aphasia or speech issues, or they're not aware. I'll just see if they caught that small slice of humor. And if they did, they may chuckle. They don't even know why they're chuckling, But if they did and they laughed, all of a sudden their brain got engaged with me. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I get that.
And they're releasing dopamine and other neurotransmitters that comes with being happy or being like more calmer, right? So now their whole body starts activating towards a positive direction before we even gave one acupuncture needle, And so now the whole person, it's like an enzyme reaction. Their body is in preparation inside, and you're explaining what you're going to try to accomplish and everything, and they're more engaged. You're like, okay, that sounds pretty good. Let's just give it a try, versus the standoffish girlfriend or spouse or whatever who doesn't want to who doesn't really want to be there, so. Because a lot of times, even a difficult brain type of condition patient, they don't want to be there either. They're very confused. They're very scared. So, and it's our job to make them comfortable. And so the session starts right at that moment, my opinion, for sure.
Once you've engaged the Shen.
Yeah. So the Shen is big, and in the classics, the Shen can overcome almost all diseases, right? There's some classics that talk about that. We use like PC6 Niguan to, it's a very strong Shen producing point or Shen tonifying point. So, and someone could be very manic or very disturbed in the room. And now you don't want to engage your Shen. You want to shrink back your own Shen. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Like you have to respond accordingly, because now you have to wait and be patient and not panic. And hopefully
you're back to that push hands thing. They're coming at you very big. You don't disengage, but you also don't meet them big.
Exactly. You're just keeping up with them, but you're also not going to stumble with them, because that's what they want. It will cause a positive feedback of flaring up the situation, right? And that's another great example. After we have situations like that, I'll observe myself and kind of rate myself, like, how did I handle that? Was I clear-headed? Did I start sweating? Like, did I panic? And so that only helps me prepare myself if something like that happens again. Or can I be level-headed and balanced and handle the situation too?
Yeah. Wow. We've just spent like the last 10 or 15 minutes just on how, not what we do in clinic, but the how we are in clinic.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting, right? So
yeah, I think it is. Of course, the what we do is also important. I'm not dismissing it in any way, shape, or form. It's essential. But there's something, and this has been an inquiry for me for a while now, this how we are.
Right.
And I don't have big answers for it, other than a sense of inquiry, not unlike you palpating the head or the neck.
No, but it's
this thing
totally
about
related.
Like watching ourselves.
Yeah. It's the practice of that. You know how we said, like, you've gone to 350 something episodes, but the practice of how you did it kept improving. It's hard to say exactly how it improved, right?
No, I can't.
But it's become a thing, so.
Well, there's the gong fu. It's persistence over time, step by step, drip by drip, conversation by conversation. Something happens over time.
Right. The bubbling spring that never stops.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I even I still will psych myself up or then calm myself down. Like towards the end of the others, I'll just keep going. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to burn out. I better go, so yeah.
So I would like to turn a bit back to what you're doing in clinic. So I get it that you started out, you're looking to help stroke patients, and now you find yourself able to do that with confidence. You can help others learn to do it with confidence. And you're finding you can work with Parkinson's. That's got my attention because I've been phenomenally unsuccessful at helping people. Sometimes I make them worse more than better.
Yeah, that can happen.
Is what I've found. I mean, Parkinson's is a very weird one. Stuff I think is going to be helpful. No, I put some needles in and they really start shaking. It's like now what? Clearly that was wrong.
Or it just may have been missing a couple pieces, you see? So, like when you treat things like Parkinson's, you're directly stimulating nerve branches and parts of the nervous system. So it is like poking the bear, right?
Okay.
And yeah. And whenever we treat any kind of brain type case or brain related case, if we did a great job, that person's in the first 2 or 3 sessions, they're super tired. They want to take a long nap because their brain hasn't been challenged. Their nervous system hasn't been challenged for a long time, kind of because a lot of people have also been pampering them, overly like taking care of them in a way that the person still needs to engage and take care of themselves as well. You see what I mean?
Over cared for.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought.
Over cared for can cause they're gonna stop trying themselves.
No, I was just thinking, I read something earlier today about, this was talking about kids, well, and people that you love, your spouse for that matter, that one of the worst things that you can do is take away their necessary suffering.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes like kids in particular, like there's some stuff they got to work through. You know, they think the world is a certain way. Well, it's not. And as they go through finding out, like, wow, it's a lot harder to get a job than I thought it was. Like, don't help them get that job. I mean, support them in working through it. But sometimes, man, when you're working out what the world is actually like, it's rough. You got to let go of all kinds of illusions of how you thought things were. And so to step in and take away someone's suffering as they're kind of like leveling themselves up for dealing with bigger challenges, that's a big mistake. I mean, it's putting a hindrance in them that will be very hard to overcome. So
Yeah, it's better if they have some failures early in development.
Yeah.
And that causes a switch or an upgrade of them realizing I had to come meet this challenge, or I'm not invulnerable. This could happen to me, but I'll be okay.
Yes.
If I do something, and that's a huge thing, even with like, when you, like when you get puppies from like a puppy mill or something, and they're taken away from the mother too early. So when this dog this canine develops, they'll have huge behavioral issues, right? So you can never take them away earlier than like, I think it's like 8 to 12 weeks, because while they're growing and they're with their mother, the mother has to wean them. So they, their teeth get sharper and they're getting, milk from their mother. When it gets too sharp and they just want, the mother has to snap at them when they bite too hard. That snap fixes all the behavior issues that could happen with that puppy. And if you take them away before that happens, they think that they can get everything. They're not going to hold back. They'll spaz out. They'll be like out of control because they never got the no from their mother. You can't do that. It's kind of interesting,
Development is an issue.
Yeah.
For sure.
For sure.
Okay. So back to treating Parkinson's for a moment.
Yeah. So what we do is, as I was getting better at treating specific things like concussion and brain and Parkinson's issues, like we started to invest in getting things like QEEG brain scanning equipment and learning how to use it. And so we would scan the brain.
Wait a minute. What did you just say? I don't even know what you just said.
Oh, it's a quantitative electroencephalogram. It's like a skull cap with wires and electrodes that you put on the head, and you can measure the brainwave activity of a patient and see all the different in live, as it's happening, brainwave activity and how the brain's talking to the other parts of the brain too. And we can scan their mind and see how healthy, or whether it's underfiring or overfiring, and causing different brain disorders that can come up too, whether it's depression or ADHD, or there's even patterns that'll show up if someone has like some autism too. So and as my practice grew, we started incorporating very high level modern technology just to see what the effect was with these acupuncture points, and to guide us too, to see if we were getting closer or further from helping them.
So part of your diagnostics is to do a brain scan from time to time.
Yeah. We have depending on the patient and the severity and what's needed, we'll do we call it like an awakening program, where we look at every diagnostic scan, blood work, pulse, tongue, skull palpation from our system. And then we may do an initial scan. We may say it's recommended because of this case that you should do an initial QEEG brain scan. And then after 10 or 20 sessions, we may rescan the brain and do a comparison. And it's pretty amazing. It gives you like a live picture of the brain. And you can even have two skull caps on, where one person is a Qigong practitioner and the other person is the patient. And you can see how the Qigong practitioner's brainwave activity changes. And then you can see how the patient receiving the Qigong starts to change too, which is really neat. We'll see different
That's interesting. I talked to a fellow a while back who's using MRIs to look at the brains of patients and practitioners simultaneously.
Yeah. We use functional, we'll get a report like a functional MRI. So we'll get pixelated activity of where the, let's say, hyperfiring or upfiring is happening. And then we'll design like an acupuncture protocol to help treat that. And we may even use different photobiomodulation devices like special helmets or headsets that'll help induce, for instance, with Parkinson's, because I know you're interested in Parkinson's, we may use gamma wave activity type devices that is amazing for helping a Parkinson's patient's dementia. And the reason why is because in the past half to a full decade, there's been a lot of studies showing that gamma wave activity can help dissolve the plaque that's forming in the Lewy bodies that's forming in the brain for Parkinson's patients. And that you can actually see an improvement in memory and even dexterity. The coolest thing is it doesn't even have to be like an expensive laser device. It could just be gamma wave sound too. It can be an app that has gamma wave frequency.
Gamma wave frequencies help dissolve plaques?
Plaque in the brain. So the abnormal protein that's deposited into the brain in Parkinson's patients, into the basal ganglia and into the substantia nigra, in that whole area, basically they have proven now in the research that gamma wave frequencies, it could be light or sound, can actually start to dissolve this abnormal protein buildup in the brain. And just being exposed to it actually can help with memory and also muscle coordination, because it helps the basal ganglia and cerebellum, which helps to control the smoothness between your antagonistic muscles for motor movement.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's out there, it's proven, and by actually putting very simple non-scalp techniques, but just very simple correct positioning of needles along gallbladder points like gallbladder 8, Schweigu, gallbladder 9, gallbladder 10. And there's a way to know which one it is because it'll form these little ridges above and behind the ear. You can feel these little palpation spots that I mapped out. And if you needle that, it actually helps it even further. It's really amazing. It starts to, the patient starts to move better. Their core gets better. They can move their legs better too. So.
Wow. I'm going to have to check out the head more. I've got a person I see for Parkinson's on a regular basis now. Very damp, like soggy pulse, fluid-filled tissue. I'm just damp. I mean, the fluid just does not let the yang qi circulate. There's that.
Yeah. We call that like a yin excess. And yin excess could be an excess of blood stasis, could be an excess of fluid, or it could be an excess of protein, but it's blocking all these areas. And if you palpate along above the ear and behind the ear, you're going to find some funny ridges of tissue. And this is early to announce it, but I'm actually writing a book about how to palpate the skull. It's going to be a skull diagnosis book. And I'm working with an artist to show the location that I've mapped out that shows patterns for Parkinson's, for concussions, for even COVID-19. There's an area of the head that'll show up. And if you needle that area, like there's huge improvements with COVID long haulers. So to me, the skull palpation tells as much as the pulse and tongue, and it's more objective. It's like feeling these tangible formations that appear along the head and neck area. So
this is great. I will start putting my hands more on people's head and go and investigate. I love having this kind of thing, Clayton. The idea that there's an area and go explore it. Like there's something here, there's stuff that you found. And, I'm sure if I go and pay attention, I will find things as well. I mean, it's nice to have a book with different things mapped out, But there's also something wonderful about like, oh, that direction over there. Like, go take a look. Like, take the skills you have now and just go investigate.
Yeah. And it's amazing because I like to point things to an area, but kind of exactly what you're saying. I don't want to be saying there's a specific time for this reservation for you to show up to find what you're supposed to find. I think you have to just know the area where you want to direct your senses, and you find what you find,
Yeah. Love it.
So yeah. So even when I hired a medical artist, actually, when we made the pictures for what the head will look like, it's really a representation that's going to guide you, but you still have to learn the touch and how to palpate, like you said. And hearing you being excited that you want to touch a patient makes me super happy because that's the biggest part of it. Meaning like this could be like one meridian early in the series of meridians that were ever created. Meaning like there should be many more books about this if we all start observing now. This is just the first pointer, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a way of using your sensorium to pay attention and gather information.
Exactly. So
yeah. I want to turn for a moment to prevention, especially as people are living longer and longer. It's always better to prevent problems than to cure problems. So what are things to think about or look for or attend to or consider in your patients who might be 50 years old, 60 years old, right? That's probably a good time to start cleaning house, so to speak, to make sure problems don't show up later.
Right. Definitely. So one of the things like that I think is one of the sneakiest symptoms that happens that just sneaks in there, just like hypertension or something, is flexibility, right? Like it silently disappears and you won't know it until you have to pick up that penny or quarter on the ground. You're like, oh, I can't reach it or something, So what I like to pay attention to is things related to flexibility, things related to like the shape of the neck and also the back of the neck area around that due-14 area, because I find that depending on the person and how they're aging and whether they're getting osteoporosis or other developing immune system issues, the shape of the neck will start to change, and you'll start seeing, things like a little dowager's hump and stuff like that. So, and it could be on a man or a woman, but like you can actually observe that quite easily, and it's not bone or anything. It's actually just fluid too, but looking at your senses is also some of the things you want to look at with brain longevity, because every sense we have is related to cranial nerves and how they attach to the brain, meaning like balance and sounds is related to your ears, right? So that's your vestibular system or the water element, right? So going into refining like a good kidney yang or yin formula is a great start, but I'll take the cue from like how my senses are they doling out, meaning some people, they don't realize they lost their smell. They can't smell like coffee or a jar of peanut butter that's like an arm's length away, So looking at your five senses, like your vision, your smell, your hearing, your taste, things like that. It's kind of funny. That's why like elderly people, especially in Chinese culture, like my mom's like 85 and she plays in a league of other 85, 90 or 100-year-old people and they'll play mahjong for hours, right? But they're taking a tile and they're slamming it on the ground and they're looking and they're relating patterns very quickly and they're thinking quickly, right? And they're memorizing chips and stuff like that. So they're actually stimulating the senses so much, and then they have to mix it around and mix the chips around and then count it again. And, and it goes very quickly, things like holding a heavy book, right? When you hold a heavy book and you open it, it has a smell, right? The paper smells a certain way.
And a certain feel.
Because the book is heavy. But today, if all your books are on an iPad,
not mine,
you can't smell anything, right?
Not mine. I love a book. And I'll tell you what I've noticed about books lately. I mean, I think it's awesome that we have like on-demand printing, but the paper is a little slick and it doesn't turn very well. Little things like that. I mean, like the quality of paper.
Yeah. Those like parchment.
Or maybe I'm just losing the ability to, with my dexterity, to turn pages in a book. That's a possibility. No, seriously. You're talking about being aware of your senses. I know my eyesight has changed dramatically. And yeah, the dexterity in my fingers for turning pages, I was blaming it on the paper. Maybe I should go get some old books from the library and see if I have trouble with old paper as well as new paper.
Yeah, I mean,
But no, I mean, it's something to consider.
yeah, those are like cookbooks, right? Old cookbooks, the parchment's like paper is different.
Yep.
New cookbooks, like you said, it's so slick, and you're just not getting that feel,
It's a different feel.
Exactly. It's like a different feel.
It's a different feel. Yeah. Okay.
So there's also like memory tests that you can do with yourself and your own reaction time. Those are good to do too. So, and something as very simple as just standing on one leg, raising your knee up and seeing whether or not you're wobbling or if you can even hold it for, like 10 or 20 seconds, right? Like it's very simple, but it can tell you a lot of stuff about, about your parietal lobe or your cerebellum and your coordination. Are you losing your coordination, right?
Yeah. So let's say you have someone who's noticing that kind of thing, not uncommon. Where would you begin with some ideas for treatment?
So what I would do is I would start to isolate which lobes of the brain I think may need tweaking, right? And then I have like a set of, like for each lobe of the brain, we have like certain sets of different acupuncture needles we may want to use, right? And then we definitely would take them through a series of more trying to look at it objectively, like neurological tests that you can do in the treatment room. And some of it could be as simple as you're closing your eyes and you're just raising your wrists, or you're standing toe to toe, like what they might do, like pulled over for driving funny, But the coolest thing is we put the points in, very simple points, and afterwards the test is greatly improved. It's almost like a different person standing in front of you,
That's got to be gratifying work.
Yeah. Like we do a lot of gait analysis. We'll watch someone walk up and down the hall about 20 feet, and then you could do very, very simple point with like the celestial pillar, and you needle it in gently at the right angle. You can even keep it in like Dalian, and watch the person walk very quickly, very confidently. And if I see that happen, right, because I use like the celestial pillar, I'll know that like, okay, it wasn't because their piriformis was off or their meniscus. Do you see what I'm trying to say? This was not an orthopedic issue. This is because
No, it was a brain issue.
the brain was low firing. It wasn't firing efficiently enough.
Wow. This is cool.
So you can rule out, is this physical? Or is this like the central nervous system just needs a little tweaking, And the point is like what we do, what we already know is perfect for this. We just have to be aware that we can confidently suggest that, hey, we can treat you and help prevent things like, dementia and Parkinson's, and keep you on a steady path. There was a study where they had Parkinson's patients, right, who had pretty severe Parkinson's, and they definitely was on a high dose of levodopa, for instance, right? And one group practiced Tai Chi, okay? The other group didn't practice Tai Chi. And I think they did Tai Chi for like 3 months, right? Regular practice. Both groups, right, had to increase their medication after 3 months, because this is already pretty middle stage, strong Parkinson's, right? But the group that did Tai Chi increased the dosage of levodopa by only 50% of what the group that didn't practice Tai Chi do. So Tai Chi was slowing down the rate of deterioration, is what the study showed. And when you move slowly with those kind of movements, including yoga and certain Qigong, you're moving slow enough so that the nervous system can reset itself.
Yes. Slow enough to notice.
When you move super fast, yeah, the nervous system is very smart. It's observing you as you observe yourself. It's still observing you, So, and that's what I learned with slow movement practices. Or I know there's like a gym in New York City, and all they do is very slow movement weightlifting. They said you only have to do these body parts once a week. It's the equivalent of lifting strong and heavy, like 3 or 4 days a week, but they do it once a week as slow as possible. And the reason why, in theory, is because your central nervous system can make an adjustment, you know?
So you're not just training your muscles, you're training your nervous system.
Yes. You're making it think differently, right? I don't usually move 20 pounds this slowly. Like, why are you, the nervous system is saying, like, why are you doing this? Like, you never do this. And now I'm sweating and I'm still moving it forward and I have to lean forward and I don't want you to fall over, you know? So it's like, it's making it perform differently, basically.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Clayton Shu, there's a lot here that we've covered today. Holy smokes. If people want to see what you're up to, where would they go?
So I have a new website that we just revamped of the program I was teaching. It's called nanopunctureseminars.com. And it's about 8 different modules. And each module covers a different part of treating the brain or damage or disorders. So one module is like a foundation module that teaches how to create healthy brain blood flow for in general, most stroke cases. That's our foundation, where we teach how to manipulate the needle in very simple ways that I learned in Tianjin. But then other modules will be like, for one weekend, all we're doing is working on the gait, how someone walks, and how do you treat that? How do you know how to do it?
Okay. So pretty comprehensive. We go through it.
Right. So I broke it down into body systems related to the brain. Like one module is actually related to speech aphasia in the left hemisphere. And that's an amazing module because I had students take that course. They'll fly back to California. They have a stroke patient or someone that has a tube, down their throat, and they'll do the sessions, and a week later they can take the feeding tube out of the person, and it's amazing because they just learned it in 2 days. Okay, we can apply it now. And so I broke it into those.
It's fun to do the impossible, isn't it?
Right. but by doing the very simple and familiar, right? That's the
and it's
beauty of it.
And simple and familiar. I'm struck by nothing special, things we already know. Go at it attentively.
Yeah, just make it like a pure sweet spot, like familiar zone, and you'll be so comfortable doing it that you'll feel confident. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, that's a good place to land the plane today.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to say before we wind it down?
No, I definitely thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to share, my knowledge and just to share like what I think is really important, and important because just as you have the difficult Parkinson's patient, I want to say that the solution isn't difficult or complex. It's just learning how to play the instrument in a simple, profound, but simple way,
All right. I'm going to go work on...
So I appreciate you.
I'm going to go work on my arpeggios.
Arpeggios, right? Exactly.
All right.
So.
Well, thanks, Clayton. It's been a delight today.
Great catching up to you, too. Thank you for having me.
Especially in an aging population, the issues of compromised neurological systems and brain health, it's a big deal. In the coming years, being able to prevent or slow the deterioration that comes with aging, it's not only going to be good for your practice, it's also an opportunity to help prevent a lot of suffering. East Asian medicine, we have both ideas and methods for the preservation of capacity and helping to support people through the various stages of life. It's one of the things that we like to say we're good at, and I think it's true. Maybe because I'm in this demographic, I think about brain health on a regular basis. I'm glad that Clayton is doing this work and look forward to hearing more about how he's helping people with that curious organ that we call the brain. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.